If you'd like to be able to listen to the show without ads and have full access to bonus content, that's an option. To find out how, please go to dogmanencounters.com/podcast. If you'd
Hey,
like to be able to
everyone.
listen to the show without ads and have full access to bonus content, that's an option. To find out how, please go to dogmanencounters.com/podcast. Well, so much for that glitch. Thanks for joining us for tonight's special live stream episode of the show, everyone. I really appreciate it. Tonight's guest wishes to remain anonymous. With that in mind, we're just going to call him Jimmy. Jimmy, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you much for having me.
Oh, no, you're welcome. We appreciate your time. Jimmy, you were featured on episode 401, and on that show, you told us about the first Dogman encounter you've had. For anyone who's missed that encounter, that show, please tell us about yourself.
Okay. Well, I'm 44. I live in Somerset, New Jersey. And I've been following your show for probably close to 8 years now. Yeah, I had a Dogman encounter. My first Dogman encounter was back in 2017 at my now in-laws' house.
It's funny how when you talk with eyewitnesses, so many eyewitnesses I have over the years, in a lot of ways, the encounters tend to run together. But there are certain encounters where you remember bits and pieces about them because this stood out or that did. With you, when you had that first encounter, you told us on the show about your friend who you said he was a little on the heavy side, but when you two saw the dog man, you took off and left him and apologized to him, but you're getting out of Dodge. Well, next thing you know, you said that you saw your buddy come blowing right past you. And I thought that was so funny. Yeah, I'll never forget that encounter. And speaking of that, for anyone who missed that episode, please talk us through what happened when you had that first experience.
Okay. That's funny. That put a smile on my face. Okay, so that took place back in 1999, and I was with a friend of mine, and we were walking down. Um, it had to be around midnight, and um, we were walking near this house that had I still don't remember if it was a German Shepherd or if it was a Doberman, and this dog was barking at us, and we were probably over 100 yards away, but it just kept barking. And then out of nowhere, it's like, it just stopped barking. Everything was quiet, and then we heard this very loud growl. I'm standing on the left side of the road, and my friend is standing on the right side of the road, and the growl was more closer to me. So as soon as we heard the growl, it was just a knee-jerk reaction. I didn't even think about him. I'm a terrible friend, but I just left as quick as possible, and I thought I left him in the dust. And it was just like, you see on the Bugs Bunny cartoon where the one guy thinks he's running fast, and all of a sudden my friend he blows right by me. And I'm like, oh man, like I didn't think he had afterburners like that. So he left me in the dust, and I was the one that was going to be the slow poke. But it's funny. I actually saw the guy not too long ago, and we chatted about that. It was we had a good chuckle about it, and then he punched me in the arm. I was like, all right, well, I deserve that.
Well, it sounds like you took it well, but as you know, a lot of people wouldn't because you're basically hanging them out to dry. I don't blame you when things go sideways like that. You never know you're going to respond, and you can't be faulted for doing that. But did he ever act like he might have held a grudge against you for doing that?
I think if it had actually turned out to be something, because it was just the noise that we heard. We didn't see anything. We didn't hear anything following us. Um, Actually, it's funny because legend has it, in that area, there was rumors that there was like a mountain lion wandering around there. Um, yeah, I don't know how far back. Like I said, this is 1999. Um, but there's all these legends and folk tales. Um, so I think the fact that it was just okay, we heard something, we ran, and then that was like the end of it. And by the time we stopped running, there was nothing behind us. So no, I mean, we're extremely close friends, and we didn't, and he didn't ever seem to hold a grudge against me or anything like that. I just remember saying like, I just can't believe how fast you were. He's like, yeah, I always have to make sure because he has a brother. He said, I always have to make sure I was faster than my brother. It's not the first time I've had to run away from something.
Well, fear is quite the motivator, so things like that do happen. And I'm so glad it didn't damage your friendship or anything like that. Thank goodness.
Yeah, yeah, nah.
Yeah, that wouldn't have been a good thing. It's been a long time since we spoke. Since that last conversation we've had, what's your mindset been like regarding dogmen?
Um, it's still on my mind on a daily basis. I'm still very wary, but at the same time, I have a life to live, and I'm a father, I'm a husband. Um, I have responsibilities. I have things that I need to get done in this life, and you know, um, I'm not going to say that I'm going to go plop myself in the middle of the woods by myself and pretend that I have no fear. But at the same time, I'm not going to let that fear dictate how I go about my daily life.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you can still function and do everything that you need to do to live your life the right way. So, as long as you can say that, that's great news. In 2018 or 2019, you had an experience with your wife that just might have been dogman related. Without giving away any details about the encounter, did your wife see a dogman when the two of you had that experience?
No, she did not.
She didn't. If she didn't see one, then what's her whole mindset when it comes to these guys?
Um, I would say she's not a believer, but she's a sympathizer. Um, I think I mean, she knew me, she's known me since 2010. So, she's seen how I was beforehand and then how I was after the encounters. And I think once she saw that I wasn't doing this like embellishing, that it really seemed to kind of put me on my heels for quite a while. I think she eventually came around to being very supportive. Actually, she's my number one um, supporter. So, I think it took a little bit for her to uh, wrap her wrap her mind around the idea. Um, I can't say for certain exactly what her mindset is, but through conversations that we've had, she's never like poked fun at me for it, or you know, she knows it's a sore spot for me, and it'd be very easy for somebody to you know expose that and take cheap shots, but she doesn't do that. She's been extremely supportive.
Wow, she sounds like a keeper to me. Sounds like you have a really good wife. That's great.
Yeah, I
And
definitely do.
of course, that makes all the difference when you have an encounter with one of these things. Your second encounter, Jimmy, happened at a different property than the one you lived at when you had that first one. What can you tell us about this new place?
Okay, so we're talking about the one that has to do with the main title. So I'm sorry. Can you just repeat the question real quick?
Sure, no problem. Yeah, I'm just wondering what you can tell us about this new property since it's a different property. When you had that first encounter, it was a totally different place.
Okay, about the property. Okay, so it's in my wife's family, and we have 2.5 acres. Um, and we're not very, excuse me, we're not very far off from civilization. Really, we're kind of like in a perfect island, surrounded by woods. We're not too far from the canal. Um, the back of our property butts up to the DNR, so it's all preserved. Um, there's a cornfield that is in the back of our property. We technically own part of that cornfield, um, but the local farmer he tends to it. So he takes care of the corn and all that. But we have our own privacy back here, and we have quite a bit of wildlife, ranging from you know raccoons, deer, groundhogs, coyotes, um, and apparently the occasional dogman.
Yeah, I'd say more than apparently, that's a definitive thing, unfortunately. All right, Jimmy, please tell us about this most recent encounter now. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
Okay, so the most recent encounter had to do with um, I was coming home from dropping off my son. Was on a Wednesday, and I believe it was around this time of year. Um, and I was driving down a nearby road, and I had seen a fox on in the middle of the road, and that's very normal. So, um, but I just decided to just kind of beat my horn and rev my engine and just, okay, come on, get out of the way. I don't want to run you over. Just move it along. So the fox started to, scamper to the side of the road and actually took off in the direction towards my house. So I actually said to myself out loud, I was like, all right, I guess I'll see you later. So I get to the end of the road, make the left, pull down onto my road, and um, pull into my driveway, walk into the house, say hello to my wife, and a little while later, I'm just sitting in the rec room, playing with our two cats, and in our backyard, we have, like I said, we have a fair amount of trees, and we have um, motion lights on some of those trees, and one of those lights kept going off. So I I made a mental note, and excuse me, sorry, I got distracted there for a sec. So my wife had noticed that one of the motion lights was going off, kind of like right in the middle of the property. So she brought it to my attention, and she said, "Hey, that light keeps going off. Can you want to go see what that's all about?" So, being the good husband, I said, "All right, sure." So I go out there. Now, I don't own any firearms. The deadliest thing I own is a sword and a crossbow. So that'll come into play later. So I head out there with a flashlight and a little BB gun, just in case. So coyotes are a fairly normal thing for us to come across. So I uh, I go into the backyard, shine the flashlight, and I'm looking at the light where the motion light had gone off, and sure enough, I see the fox out there, and he's running away, but he's being chased by something, appears to be a little larger than him. So I follow with my flashlight. I shine the light on the two animals and I see that it's a coyote. So the coyote's chasing off the fox, and I'm like, oh, okay. Like it's common, but it's not all that common. I would say it's on average. We've been here 4.5 years. I would say on average we see maybe we have about a dozen coyote sightings per year. So common, but not that common. We um, so I see the coyote, and I'm just like, okay, that's odd. But then the coyote just kind of seemed to give up on the chase, and um, so I take my flashlight, and now I'm scanning my backyard. So just to give you a quick picture, if you go into my backyard from patio to the left is the cornfield, and um, then you get to a little white shed, and then to the right there is a big red barn, um, which has a bunch of spotlights and motion lights on it. Um, just because when we moved out to the property, um, it gets really dark out there, and having had my first encounter, I said to my wife, we really need to light this place up. So we've added quite a few lights. So sorry, I digress. Um, so I'm noticing that in the cornfield, now that all the corn had been chopped down already. So it's just open field now. But it's you can hear the leaves, crunching, and the dry corn, the bits of corn that are still there. They crunch when you walk on them. So and I can hear all that. And I take my light and I'm just scanning from left to right, and all of a sudden I see these pairs of eyes, and I start to count because it's not it's very common to have a herd of deer, anywhere between like 2 to 10 deer on any given morning or night. So I'm thinking, okay, it's just a herd of deer, and I'm looking, and I count 1, 2, 3 pairs of eyes, and I go all the way up to about a dozen. And I would say total there was about 14 or 15 what would be coyotes that were just hanging out uh, in that cornfield, which from me to them was probably about 75 yards away. So far enough for, there to be a good amount of distance where I could scoot back in the house if I needed to. Um, so they all pay attention to me, and I actually looked at the BB gun in my hand, and I actually laughed. And I said, "What is this going to do? This is just going to tickle them. I'm better off just, throwing it at them and just trying to get away." But I decided not to do that, realizing that these are predators, and the odds are not in my favor. So I was like, all right, well, this is still my property, and I'm going to defend my turf. So I back into my house. So I'm in the middle of the backyard, and I'm walking backwards um, towards my patio, which leads to my back door. And at this time, I get inside, and my wife's on the phone with somebody, and she says, "What was it?" And I said, "It was a coyote." She's like, "Oh, how many?" I said, "All of them." And she just says, "Be careful." So I head back outside, and my crossbow is in the garage, which you can get to right from my patio. So I'm like, all right, if I need to take one of these things down just to send a message, I'll do that. Hopefully, it doesn't come to that. So I go into the garage, grab the crossbow, still have the light, the flashlight. Um, I actually just remember I do have a flashlight on the crossbow. It's just something I rigged up. It's nothing, you know, efficient or anything like that. I've never actually had to actively use this crossbow other than target practice. So I take my previous position out in the backyard, and I noticed that these pack of coyotes have started to move in a little bit, and there's four that seem to be the leaders because they're pretty much like the offensive line, and they're all standing, shoulder to shoulder, and they're not coming into the light. Um, it, I would, if I remember correctly, it was probably close to, if not a full moon, because there was a decent amount of light coming from the sky, not just the motion lights. So I could see silhouettes, but no details. So they're doing a good job of staying out of, the lights, which makes sense. They're stealthy predators. So I'm not hearing any growling or anything like that. Um, but then I go to take aim because I'm looking to stand my ground here. You're not just gonna come around and run me off. So then um, it was it literally seemed out of nowhere. So like I said, if you're looking at my backyard from left to right, cornfield, white shed, and then the big red barn. Well, coming from behind the barn, the first thing I see are these pair of eyes. And these eyes are about the size of clementines, a little smaller than an orange, but they are crystal clear. I mean, they look I mean, they were like piercing through the night. And it came from behind the barn, and attached to them I could see, just like the coyotes, I could see a silhouette. I can't see very many features, but I could see the outline of a dogman. There's really no other phrase to use or words to put to it. It was a dogman. I could see the outline of the ears sticking up. I could see the little tufts of hair in the middle of the ears. I could see the head. Um, can't see. I could see the snout like a little bit, um, but it's pretty much looking dead at me. And I didn't see any teeth because so I'm assuming the mouth was closed, but these eyes are locked dead on me. So it's coming from the right to the left, and it took maybe 3 seconds from it to get from behind the barn to walk behind the white shed. And at first, my mind is thinking, are those orbs? And they were not, because then those eyes and that silhouette appeared on the other side of the shed. And and then it stopped. It just stopped and really just stood there. And it was kind of like surveying the situation. And I had noticed that the coyotes didn't seem to react too much to the dog man, but the dog man is just standing there on the edge of the grass, right at the edge of the cornfield, just seeing what's going on. I'm thinking to myself, this just went from bad to worse. So I lower the crossbow, and I'm like, well, clearly I'm not going to be using this. And my heart's beating like rapidly. I could feel it in my chest. And one thing I forgot to mention was this dogman. It announced its presence at first because it growled that deep, resonating growl, um, and it really just it felt like a mini earthquake. Um, my closest neighbor isn't all that far from me, and I mean she's elderly, but I'm not surprised she didn't hear it. But because I don't know if it was I forget what people say that it could be infrasound, I don't know. But that growl is what got everybody's attention, my attention, the coyotes' attention. Now they were still all staring at me. So now I have the coyotes and the dog man, all eyes are on me. And that's way more attention than I want. I'm out here just to kind of see if there's a fox running around. And all of a sudden I run into so many of these coyotes. I mean, 15 on one, and then you add the big one on top of it. And that's when I just decide, you know what? I'm gonna just I'm packing it in. You know what? Like you guys, this is not a fight that I'm looking to. Um, I'm not looking to enter this fight because clearly the odds are not in my favor. So the dog man's staring at me, and I'm noticing that some of the coyotes are starting to back off, kind of go away. But those four, that front line, they are so close. Like they're probably, dare I say, 50, 60 feet from me, still stay, and everybody's doing a really good job of staying out of these spotlights that I have. Doesn't light up the whole backyard, but it lights up quite a bit. So I'm looking behind me, and my back door from me is probably about 30, 35 feet, and the coyotes are about 50 or 60 feet from me, and the dog man is probably about, I'd say, like 75 feet. I know I said originally that the cornfield was 75 yards. And I apologize. I'm not the best with distances, um, but it's um, it's just not looking good for me. So I decided, okay, I'm going to lower the crossbow to show I'm not a threat, and I'm also not trying to make direct eye contact with anybody. So I'm just slowly starting to walk backwards, and I'm thinking to myself, run, run, just run. And I'm saying, no, don't run. That's just going to make things a hell of a lot worse, and you won't even make it to the door. Then you're just going to cause your ticket to get punched. So I'm slowly backing away, and I turn my head a little bit just to see how far, so I don't want to trip over like a rock or anything like that. And then when I turn back, the dog man's gone, but those coyotes are still there. There's at least 10 coyotes still staring at me. So I slowly just start backing in, and I make it inside. My wife is nowhere. Um, so I make it in the house, and I put the crossbow away, and I go to the rec room, which has a window that overlooks the whole backyard. And I look and I see like there's still a handful of coyotes, and now they're just kind of, they know they've won. It's like, oh, now they're just gonna hang out in the backyard. And I actually got very angry because I'm like, you know what? Like, I I I wanted to defend my territory, but at the same time, I knew that I made the right decision, um, because I didn't want that night to be my last night. So that's pretty much that encounter, um, with everything that had to do with the coyotes and the dogman.
Wow, yeah, that's a lot. That's the last thing you were expecting when you were sitting there in the house that night trying to unwind. How far were you from home? when you saw that fox for the first time while you're driving home?
Oh, it was only a minute. It was to get to my house, it's like you go down this one street, which is where I saw the street that I saw the fox was parallel to my house. So as the crow flies, it was maybe quarter of a mile.
Oh, I see, a quarter of a mile. Yeah, that's really close then. When you first saw it being chased by the coyotes, were they on your property or behind it when you went out the back door?
They were on they were on my property. They were in the backyard.
I see. Yeah, you said you live on about 2 acres, and then there's that cut down the harvested cornfield behind you. So I wasn't sure if when you saw them, they were in that cornfield or if they're actually on your property. So thanks for clearing that up for me. Coyotes don't normally abandon chases very easily. Do you think they stopped chasing the fox because you were there or some other reason?
I mean, it appeared to be just myself and the coyotes. Um, maybe they were aware. I don't know. I mean, maybe you hear these stories where coyotes and dogman kind of hang out together, and maybe they knew that their boss was nearby. Um, so I don't know. Maybe they were kind of in cahoots. Who knows?
Well, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they were in cahoots at all. A lot of credible eyewitnesses reported seeing coyotes running with dogmen. It wouldn't be first or unprecedented in any way. Did the coyotes seem to be under the dogman's control?
Honestly, I would say yes. He seemed to have, you know, I say he. Um, it seemed to have, like invisible leashes on these things. Like, if it gave whatever command to, attack or, to advance on me, I think they would have listened. Um, but yeah, I mean, it almost was a stalemate um, until I started backing away. Um, but oh well, something I forgot was that I had an air horn with me before I went and got my crossbow, and the only time that the coyotes really seemed to, um, you know, approach in a somewhat aggressive way was I went to go squeeze this air horn, which I hadn't used in a while, and instead of it blaring a loud noise, it just sent out almost like a whistle noise, which was basically like ringing the dinner bell. And they heard it, and they actually started to come closer. And they said, "All right, I am not using this thing anymore." And I actually threw it down on the ground. I went out the next morning and I got it. But yeah, that was not a good call.
Yeah, sounds like it. It had to be awfully disheartening to hear that pitiful whistle come out instead of a blast.
Yeah, that was. I have not bought another air horn from that store.
Can't say I blame you. How close were the coyotes getting to the dog man?
I would say so. The coyotes were in front of the white barn. I'm sorry, the white shed, and the dog man was walking behind the white shed. It came from behind the red barn, made itself known, and then walked on the other side of the white shed. So I would say no more than like 20, 25 feet.
Well, yeah, it's pretty close. When the dogman walked to the other side of that white shed, was it in a hurry or was it pretty deliberate with its movements?
I felt it was very deliberate. Like I mean, it was a very steady movement. And I felt like, how can I put it? It from when it when I first saw its eyes until when it stopped moving, it was probably about like around 15 seconds. And it was just creeping along at a very steady pace, in no rush. And it was almost like its head was looking directly at me, but its body was moving, sideways, kind of like you see like, back in the 40s when you see these guys, they're like snapping everything, like they're getting ready for a rumble, and it's like they're looking dead at you, but their body's not facing the same way as their head. Um, like he was definitely checking out what was going on, and clearly I don't think he approved, but not to the point where action needed to be taken.
Yeah, thank goodness for that. While all this was going on, did you ever notice any foul smells out there?
Um, no, not really. Not to my not to my recollection. I don't remember there being any smells.
Well, if there were, I'm pretty sure you would have noticed it. So there must not have been. How about ambient noise? Was there a lack of ambient noise or were the noises normal?
That's one thing I will say is that as soon as I stepped outside to investigate what the fox was doing, as soon as I stepped outside, it was, I mean, deafeningly quiet, which was the first tip off. Um, and I realize that as I'm out there in this situation, just like wow, there's no, you know insects making noise. There's no nothing. So yeah, that was very apparent right away.
Well, I don't need to tell you that's a normal feature of a dogman encounter. It's hard to explain, but it's pretty normal. If all you could see of the dogman was its outline that night, did it seem like its fur was absorbing the light from your flashlight?
Yeah, that's something that I don't know why. I mean, you would think it would make all the sense in the world, but I never shine the flashlight towards the dog man. I think when I had the crossbow in my hand, the flashlight became secondary, and I never shine the flashlight at the dog man. Um, I don't know, maybe it was like a subconscious thing, like don't do it, because then it's gonna be like, I mean, it's already 100% real, but it's just gonna. I mean, I don't know, maybe that. I mean, I don't like it when people shine lights in my face, so I'm sure that would not have. That only could have made the situation worse.
Yeah. Sometimes they seem miffed by having a flashlight shined in their faces. Other times they don't seem to care. So there really doesn't seem to be any rhyme nor reason to it. It's hard to figure. Did its demeanor seem to change though when it could tell that you knew it was there?
I really don't think so, because it just kind of had this presence where it's almost like, when the kids are fooling around in the playroom and then the adult comes in and just stands in the corner and folds his arms and says, "All right, what's going on here?" That's kind of how I felt. I felt like, this creature came and was just kind of seeing what was going on between the coyotes and myself, and kind of put everybody in their place. Like it got me to retreat back into the house, and it got the coyotes to kind of move along with their business. So, that's kind of the stance that I feel like it took, was a very authoritative, non-aggressive uh, way to be.
Well, it's definitely in charge out there, and it obviously knew it. If the dogman was about 75 feet from you when you saw it at first, it could have grabbed you before you even made it to your back door. Did that aspect of the encounter cause you to have any nightmares?
Nightmares, no, but that is not lost on me, because um, I constantly am going in my backyard at night, and um, you know, I hate to say it, at 44 years old, I'm still checking around corners to see if the boogeyman is there. Um, so it's right in the front of my mind. But like I said, it's like I have a life to live. So, the fear's there, and it's always going to be there, but I don't want it to have um, a debilitating hold on me.
Well, thank goodness it doesn't. And that's more than a lot of eyewitnesses can say, unfortunately. And I'm just so glad that you don't have that problem. When you turned your back to look for the dogman after looking towards your house, you said it was gone. Was the shed the only place it could have hidden from you in such a short period of time?
No, there's the back of our property. We call it the mini woods because there's a lot more smaller, or excuse me, skinnier trees in the back of our property. And there's a lot of brush back there. That's where we like dump our leaves or grass savings. It easily could have skirted around the corner back there. It's like the collection of trees back there. Like I said, we call it the mini woods, and they're all bunched together with a lot of brush and thorns, and um, it actually forms an island. Um, so anything, whether it be just something the size of a dog man, or you know, even we've found raccoons hiding back there. So no, that easily could have been another spot where it could have hid. And actually, yeah, that just gave me a little shiver.
Well, understand that really thorny, nasty places like that where people don't want to go, that's like a Holiday Inn for dogmen. For some reason, they tend to just love that. So, yeah, it might have spent a lot of time back there. It wouldn't be surprising to me, at least, if it did. How far is this new property from where you used to live?
um, I'd say it's maybe 5, 7 miles. It's almost a straight shot, to be honest with you. Actually, earlier this evening, we were at my in-laws' house, um, and ironically enough, my nephews were playing in the same spot where I saw my first dog man. And yeah, driving home, it only took 10, 12 minutes. And that's, figure around 40, 45 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour. Then, yeah, um, I would say about 5, 7 miles.
So they are close together then. Yeah, it's just a hop, skip, and a jump for a dog man, unfortunately. You think this dog man just might be the same one you encountered the first time around?
I don't think so because that first dog man was enormous. Um, like I said, with that first encounter, I was staring at the basketball hoop in the back of my in-laws' property, and that dog man's head, although it was standing probably about 10 feet away from the basketball hoop, um, its neck was even with the basketball hoop. You can figure that's a 10-foot hoop. This dog man, the more recent one, didn't look quite as big. I mean, trust me, it was still huge, but I would guesstimate it to be around 8 feet tall. It didn't look like it was standing up, like puffing out its chest or anything like that. It definitely looked like it was kind of like, creeping along, hunched over. Because when I saw it, um, like I said, I could see the outline of the head and I could see a little bit of the shoulders. This thing was broad, and but it didn't look like it would be like a 10 footer or anything over that. It looked, uh, a rough guess would be, uh, 7, 8 feet.
Well, that's still pretty darn big. Big enough to give you the willies, that's for sure. Did you ever ask any neighbors if they might have seen anything I guess you could say, unusual. Of course, you're not going to come out and ask them if they've ever seen any werewolves or quote unquote dogmen, but did you ever ask around about that?
The only person I asked was my grandmother in law, who's the owner of the property. And I asked her before we moved in there, because we moved to this property in 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic. And I was not thrilled about moving into the woods, but it was everything that we needed for the given time. And I asked her about wildlife, and I mean, she's 92, and so she's been there, done that. Um, and she told me, she's like, "Oh yeah, there's coyotes out here, and there was a bear sighting." And so my ears perked up about the bear sighting because it's not like I want to run into a bear either. And I was like, "Oh, how recently?" She's like, "Oh, about 20 years ago." I was like, "Okay, it's- okay." So, but as far as my neighbors, I mean, my wife and I, we're in our 40s. Our neighbors to the right, they're a little bit younger than us, and they have kids. Um, Everybody else on the property, excuse me, everybody else on the road is 70 years old or up. Um, we wave and say hello to each other, but I don't really engage in too much conversation. I have talked to um, my neighbor to the right. Um, I'll call him Elliot. And anytime that I do see a coyote, I did text him. Um, Anytime that I do see a coyote, because his kids are a little bit younger than mine, and I said, dude, just watch yourself, because his property is a little bit more woodsy than mine. Mine's a little bit more like open space. So I give him a heads up, him or his wife, and but we've never talked about anything quote unquote unusual. Um, I don't want to scare him, but at the same time, like, I don't want him to think I'm crazy. We're friendly. We're not. I wouldn't say we're friends. We're acquaintances. Um, but it's not something that I would be opposed to. Um, I just I don't know. I guess being in his company, it hasn't crossed my mind. I mean, it's not like I enjoy thinking about the dog man all the time, but I could see us having that conversation in the future.
It really does make you wonder if the prior owner had any experiences with that guy. I wouldn't be surprised if they did.
Yeah, I mean, um, um, I have had an encounter actually 2 weeks ago, um, with I believe was another dog man. But I've never, uh, he's never said anything to me about anything really as far as like dangers go. He's got, he's got a fair amount of people living with him. I think he's got his brother, and they have a lot of heavy equipment, out of heavy machinery. He owns his own tow truck company. So, he's constantly making a lot more noise than I am.
Yeah, it sounds like he must be. If he has machinery like that sitting around, then that dog man might spend time over there just looking around the equipment for critters to eat and other things to get into. They're very intelligent, and the more intelligent you are, the easier it is for you to become bored. So I wouldn't be surprised if it did that. So you never know. From what I understand, your property is a kind of duality to it when it comes to the vibe it puts off during the day versus at night. Please expand on that for us.
Um, yeah, my property is quite a wonderful place. When you come to my property during the day, it's a place where I like to let my kids. Um, have free reign. Um, our front yard is a decent size. The backyard is the meat and potatoes of the property. Like I said, the back bumps up to the DNR, and so I mean, it's beautiful. It's relaxing. We actually get a lot of compliments about how spacious it is, and especially moving in the middle of a pandemic. Um, a lot of people enjoyed coming over here, so you can kind of space out. We have a fire pit in the middle, um, and but once nightfall comes, um, there's a lot of shadows. There's a lot of darkness. Um, And I've always said, and I've heard other people say this, I'm not afraid of the dark. I'm afraid of what's in the dark. Um, and so, hence my desire to put as many lights up on trees or spotlights on the barns as possible, just because it's unsettling. Um, but at the same time, I try to look at things through a positive light and um, realize that it's a gift, and we're lucky to be here, and we we want to enjoy it as much as possible. Um, so
It really is a shame. Sorry, I didn't think you were done there. It really is a shame that it's got that creep factor to it at night. That sounds like, from listening to you describe how it feels, I kind of get the feeling like you just can't enjoy the property after dark the way you want to.
um, yeah, it does cause some angst. I'll Many times I'll sit out at the bonfire by myself, and I like getting a rip roaring fire going. I do take refuge in the fact that, a big fire is around me, and, a certain amount of protection. I mean, I'm not naive to the fact that I don't have anything in my possession that would stop a large predator, let alone a dogman. But, I do try to force myself to sit out there, enjoy the night. But it always takes a lot of courage to do so. There's times where I'll have a friend or two over, and if I have to, excuse myself, go inside to, use the bathroom, grab a coffee or whatever, I'll come back out and they're like, "Man, this place really, it could, it's great, but it can give you the creeps."
I can understand why you are compromised at your property, but it really is a shame that you are. I mean, that should be your castle. You should be able to walk around the whole property and not feel angst like that. But like I said, I totally get it. I understand. Does this mean, listening to you talk about how you feel about the place after dark, does this mean that if you have one more dogman encounter there that you're going to be looking to move?
Um, no, I don't think so. I mean, I don't. We have an arrangement with how long we are allowed to live here. I don't think we're going to be. Uh, if I talk to you in 10 years, I'd be surprised if we're still living here. Um, but I mean, so far so good. I mean, yes, I had an encounter, um, you know, 2 years ago, and then, like I said, I had another encounter 2 weeks ago, and there's been no altercation where there's been any destruction or damage of any kind. It's just kind of been, I'm looking at you, you're looking at me. Um, Not to say that there aren't times where you know um, I don't know if there's ever been tapping on windows, or um, sometimes you get the feeling of being watched, but I don't always see eyes peeking out looking at me, but sometimes you just kind of have that intuition that you're being watched. Um, But you know, I told you in the first time we talked recently that I am a big advocate of um, self care and doing early morning cold plunges. And I'm out in 4:30 in the morning every morning, um, jumping in the cold water, just do the cold plunge, and it uh, while the benefits are fantastic, it like I said, I bring that spotlight out with me, that flashlight every time, and I do a scan just to see what's out there. And my wife even asked me, she's like, "Why are you doing that?" I was like, "Why do you think I'm doing this? Like, come on, you know the answer to that." Um, and she's like, "Oh, okay. I didn't know that's still a thing." I'm like, "This is going to be a thing for the rest of my life." So it's just, it is what it is. But, I enjoy doing that, the self-care, the cold plunges. And, I mean, if I actually saw a dog man that was encroaching on me, then, you know, I can tuck my proverbial tail between my legs and head inside. And, I mean, if the dog man wants to come inside, then I'm helpless, But I think what I really have tried to do since the last encounter, I've really tried to show a lot of um, respect, respect for the property, respect for nature. Um, you give respect, you get respect. So that's how I'm choosing to look at it. That's how I'm choosing to treat it. Um, I'll stand my ground as much as I can. Um, I'm not a little guy. I'm not a huge guy, but I definitely will dig my heels in when I need to. But I also know when I'm not gonna, you know, try to finish a fight or I'm not gonna try to start a fight I can't finish.
I never will understand how you can do those cold plunges first thing in the morning like that, but it just proves you're a tough cookie, I'll tell you what.
Yeah, yeah. I appreciate it. I know it's not for everybody. Um, but I mean, so there was a little bit of extra that I wanted to mention. I had written down here about that latest. I call it the cold plunge encounter. I don't know if you want me to dive into that or.
Please do.
Okay, sure. Um, so it was about 2 weeks ago. Um, like I said, between 4:30 and 5 o'clock, I'm usually out there, and I think this time was around 5. So we haven't gone through daylight savings yet, so it's still very dark out there. And after I do my cold plunges, I go into the grass where I do this thing called grounding, where you just put your bare feet on the ground, and I do this little um, it's like this little movement. If anybody's ever seen, Karate Kid Part Two, where Mr. Miyagi's teaching Daniel how to do the drum technique. Now, I'm a martial artist, so I'm very familiar with this. So I'm doing this drum technique movement. It's to help warm your body up after being in cold water. And I'm always scanning. That's just something I've always done, even before Dogman ever entered my life. And I'm scanning the property. And um, at this time of year, the corn is grown again. Corn, I stood next to the corn. I'm about 6'1" on a good day. And the corn, I would say, is 7.5 to 8 feet tall. Um, so I'm scanning the property. I'm doing my martial arts movements, and I notice, I had the flashlight right near me, and I'm looking, and I thought in the middle of the corn stalks, there seemed to be just a little bit of movement. So I had my flashlight right next to me, so I picked up the flashlight and I shined it slowly, and I seen these different kind of eyes. They were like a bluish, but they were much taller than me. And like I said, I'm about 6'1", and these eyes were probably about 7 to 7.5 feet up in the air, not above the corn stalks, but pretty close to the top. And then what happened next was It was nothing short of a miracle. I had this happen to me one other time in my life where I see these eyes staring at me. Like I said, they're kind of bluish, and immediately I'm thinking like, uh-oh. So I stopped doing my movements, and I'm just slowly bringing my hands down to my side. But then I get this amazing, um, I smell. My grandmother has been passed away since 1994, but I will never forget the smell of her perfume. And I immediately I smell her perfume, and when I'm staring at these eyes, immediately I think like, I'm okay, I'm calm, I'm good. Like, yeah, there's something staring at me, but like, it sounds maybe kind of silly, but I felt like I had my guardian angel there. I felt like, you know, maybe my grandma was watching me and kind of had my back. I don't know exactly what that means, but it was an incredible feeling. Um, and I don't know, I just smiled to myself, and I looked at that dog man, and I did the traditional bow to show respect, saying, okay, I'm gonna go back. And I even said, I said, I'm going back inside now. And I walked backwards. And then when I got onto my patio, then the scent lasted maybe 10 seconds, but it was so strong. It was like somebody had just sprayed her perfume. And like I said, she's been gone a long time. And it was probably 2020 when I smelled that for the first time. And, I've heard that, I really fully believe in guardian angels. Um, Whether this dog man represents something of darkness, I don't know. It's never harmed me at all, so far be it to pass judgment. But at the same time, maybe this was a counterbalance where, if it was looking to do harm to me, maybe I had a little bit of divine intervention. So, but it was just kind of a wow moment on so many levels. It really, really moved me. So I am a strong believer in that. We have guardians watching out for us.
Yeah, it does sound like it must have been a wild moment. When it comes to these guys, there are a lot of qualities that point soundly towards them being supernatural in origin. I mean, they do so many things that's really the only explanation. So maybe they are from hell. Maybe they are demonic in nature. It's really hard to say, but you just can't explain away everything that they do by saying, okay, yeah, they're flesh and blood creatures, because there's so many things they do that just can't be explained away that way. So yeah, you might be onto something there. Well, it's about time for us to wrap it up here, Jimmy. Before we do you have any closing comments you'd like to share?
Yeah, I do. And just for the listeners, first, I appreciate you listening to my episodes. Um, I just ask that everybody realize that every single person that comes on here, um, they're sharing something very fragile. And I see a lot of people saying stuff, oh, like, oh, it's another episode. I can't wait to get my popcorn and this and that. And um, just remember, like, be sensitive and realize that, people are sharing their car crash experiences with you. And while it may be quote unquote entertainment for a lot of you, um, I'm fairly comfortable with speaking in public, but it takes a lot of um, intestinal fortitude, and it takes a lot of courage to do this and to talk about things like these. So just remember that, and what before you, if you type comments, um, like, this is just pure entertainment. This isn't Um, these aren't quote unquote stories; these are actual encounters. So, but that and Vic, I really appreciate you taking the time, not only with me, but with all the other um, survivors and people that really trust in you. Um, and I think what you have going is phenomenal. Like I said, I've been following you for a very long time. So just keep doing what you're doing, and I think if people are more sensitive to the people that come forward, then I think we're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, we definitely are if that's the case. And thank you so much for saying that. Yeah, it just is a shame when I see people talking about the episodes like I'm writing up stories, and shame on you, Vic, for not coming up with a more interesting story. I mean, there is no such thing as a Dogman encounter that's not exciting enough to come on the show. And it kind of hurts when I see an eyewitness tell me that, or I hear an eyewitness tell me that. Well, my encounter is not exciting enough to make it on the show. Excitement has nothing to do with it. The only thing I care about is, are you telling me the truth about your encounter or not? If it's true that you had an encounter or encounters, and if you want to be a guest on the show, then by all means, let's do a show. If it's not true, then of course I don't want you on. But yeah, I'm so glad you said that because yeah, it's not entertainment. This what we're doing here, we're talking about people's car crashes, like you said. That's a great way to put it. It really is. And again, I'm so glad you said that.
No, I'm just call it like I see it, and I know I've been one of those people, um, looking at that keyboard and saying, "Oh, it's real easy for me to write something, that a wise guy would write or something." But you know what? Try to put yourself in other people's shoes, and I think if we do that overall, we'd be a lot better off. So, just my dad told me, my parents told me, think before you speak. And I think, you being a father now and just trying to push that message along, just think before you speak and be sympathetic, to other people because you never know what other people are going through.
You're right. Yeah, you definitely don't. Those are good words. Well, Jimmy, I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing the details of all these experiences with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Vic. I appreciate your time, and it was my pleasure. And don't take this the wrong way, but I hope that we never have to talk again.
Well, that makes two of us. You've had way too many encounters and hope you never have another one. So I've got my fingers crossed for you. But having said that, yeah, thanks again so much for your time, Jimmy, and have a great night.
You too.
Thanks. We'll see ya. Well, that's a wrap for another one in the books. Thanks as always so much, everyone, for listening. I really do appreciate it. And as you already know, if you've had a Dogman encounter that you'd like to speak with me about in private or on the show, all you have to do is just go to dogmanencounters.com, submit a report. And if you do that, then I'll just contact you and schedule a phone conversation and we'll take it from there. But having said that, thanks again so much for listening, everyone, and have a great night.